Hello and welcome back to another Walking Dead video, and today I'll be looking at all the episodes we have got in the Walking Dead universe and ranking them from worst to best. Unlike previous years where instead of having two videos, top 10 best, top 10 worst, we only have 12 episodes, so we get one ranking list, and we will be covering two shows, The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon and The Walking Dead The Ones Who Live. So let's jump right into this very Walking Dead dry year and look back at this year ranking all 12 episodes from worst to best. And in last place, number 12, is The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, The Book of Carol, Season 2, Episode 4. This is by far the worst episode we have got this year. I absolutely hated this episode. I even gave it a 4 out of 10. This episode's terribly paced. They kill off characters just so Daryl and Carol to get back together. It is very filler, and we have this amazing setup in the previous episode just for this episode to ruin everything, in my opinion. This is a really bad middle season episode, and it has the problem of being too rushed, but also being too slow and boring. So in last place, The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2 Episode 4. Now number 11 is The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon The Book of Carol Season 2 Episode 6. This is another episode which is overhyped, and I gave this a 6.5 out of 10. This episode has some really good action. However, the biggest issue of this episode and why I rate it so low is because of how poorly paced it is and how front loaded it is. Everything great about this episode, except for one hallucination right at the end with Daryl and Isabel, was just front loaded. Everything's about the front. It's just like first 20 minutes about getting a run off of France, getting him to Ohio, to the Commonwealth, and that was fantastic. That's phenomenal. It just drags on a little too much, and it is just a very big section of just setup for Daryl Dixon Season 3, and it bores me by the end. It's a very weak finale, but it's still a good time. It's just because of how front-loaded it is, I can't just in good conscience rank it any higher than 11th place. Number 10 is Daryl Dixon Season 2 Episode 1, and this is a good episode. I gave it a 7 out of 10, and I really enjoyed them focusing on Carol and really fleshing out why Carol is heading over to France, why she needs to find Daryl. I just think the writing at times is a bit meh, like the generator going off at very inconvenient times just so you can have walkers and action scenes. But outside the very convenient writing, this episode is well acted and very interesting and a good premiere for Season 2. Number 9 is Daryl Dixon Season 2 Episode 5, and I also gave this a 7 out of 10. But this episode is absolutely amazing. There are a couple issues here and there, like I do not like how they do a villain swap yet again. It also seems very convenient that the characters keep always meeting up. They're in Paris, it's a massive city, but all the characters keep ending up bumping into each other just so you can have this cat and mouse throughout the episode. But this episode can be emotional. You have Laurent being like, I don't want to go with Daryl, and Daryl kind of being heartbroken about it, and the episode is about them getting ready to leave. There is some convenient writing here and there to stall Daryl for a bit, to be like, okay, he's leaving, but we don't want him to leave because of the story, so Ash is mysteriously trapped in a car somewhere else. So there is that lazy writing again, but this has some amazing action scenes, and they give Codron something to do, so it is a fantastic episode and really does deserve its 7 out of 10. And number 8 is The Ones Who Live Episode 6, and I also gave this a 7 out of 10. And this episode finishes off the story of Rick and Michonne. They destroy the CRM, they get home, happy ending, reunite with their children. It is a very convenient episode, and it is very badly paced. And the reason why it's so low compared to every other Ones Who Live episode is because that pacing. The rest of the episodes really take their time to focus on the love story and to slowly build up the CRM, and then you get episode 6 where it has to rush for everything because every other episode didn't put the legwork in to continue the overarching story. It is a very disappointing finale for the CRM, but it's a good finale for Rick and Michonne, and it is what I would say the actual ending of The Walking Dead. I see this show as a Walking Dead Season 12, and I'm happy with the way this show ended. I'm just a bit disappointed that they ruined the CRM to end it, so that's why I gave it a 7 out of 10. And number 7 is Daryl Dixon Season 2 Episode 2, and I give this an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed this episode, even though it has this bad issue like a lot of Daryl Dixon Season 2 episodes do, where the first half of this episode is absolutely phenomenal, but it all kind of tapers out and becomes a bit boring by the end. Both the Daryl and Carol plot did it with them just kind of being like, oh, we gotta kind of put them in a buffer zone for a bit just because we can't do anything interesting until episode 3. And that really annoyed me. But outside of the issue with the endings of the storylines in episode 2 of this episode, the storylines were great. I really enjoyed Daryl and Isabel's relationship becoming closer, and the reveal that Liu Sang is this villain. Absolutely well done, but I feel like it's a bit overdone. The writing treats us like we're stupid at times in this episode. And the Carol stopping Greenland, even though it's 100% filler, is filler well done. And I really, really enjoyed that stopping Greenland. And to see how other people and how Greenland took the apocalypse, it was a nice little break from Daryl Dixon. And number 6 is The Ones Who Live episode 1. And this episode reintroduced Rick Grimes, and it was almost perfect, but there were issues with it. One, the pacing was way too fast. We never got to see Rick's initial reaction to the CRM. I do not like them cutting off Rick's hand. And outside of that, it's phenomenal. This feels like a movie, and it is just so well done. This episode introduced Rick Grimes with a bang. It is one of the best premieres or show premieres we have in the Walking Dead universe. It is phenomenal from start to finish. I feel like story-wise, it would have been more interesting to maybe start with Michonne and then keep that hype, keep the build-up to seeing Rick at the end of the episode, but I like that we started with Rick and got Michonne later. It is a great episode and deserves this placement in my list. Now, number 5 is The Ones Who Live episode 5, and I gave this a 9 out of 10. And this episode is really Rick and Michonne back on their game. They're trying to head home until it all starts to go wrong. And this is a very entertaining episode. It only has 2 faults. And one is that they just retcon things. They break the timeline a little. Rick and Michonne no longer confirmed to be married, even though apparently they were married back in season 9, confirmed by the showrunner at the time. And the second thing is, personally, I rather Jadis was a bigger antagonist. This episode really does change your mind on Jadis and is perfectly performed by the actor. But the one issue is that Rick and Michonne feel a bit too overpowered, and instead of it's them running from Jadis, it's Jadis running from them. It's a personal thing. I rather it be the other way around, but it's still a very entertaining episode, and I think it deserved that 9 out of 10, saying that I only had 2 faults with it. And number 4 is The Ones Who Live episode 3, and I gave this a 10 out of 10. Every other episode onwards, I also gave out 10 out of 10, because these are all perfect episodes. But I feel like this is the worst out of the perfect episodes, just because I have one issue with that, and I do not like the ending. I feel like the ending is very over-the-top and dramatic for over-the-top and dramatic sake. Michonne throws them out of a helicopter, and that's the only issue I have with this episode. But everything else about this episode is amazing. I really enjoy how this episode really focuses on Rick and Michonne and their relationship breaking down, because Rick is stuck in the CRM, and Michonne's trying to save him and everything like that, and they're just not on the same page, and it leads to really well-acted scenes, a couple of arguments, and there are some amazing scenes, amazing shots in this episode. I just really enjoy this middle episode, because a lot of shows, especially Daryl Dixon this year, the middle episodes were either really good or just 100% filler. The Ones Who Lives middle episodes, they were just both really good and both really well done. This episode was about breaking Rick and Michonne's relationship, and it does it so well and so believably. And this episode deserves number 4. Now, number 3 is The Ones Who Live episode 2, and this is the Michonne episode, and I would argue this would be a better episode 1 than episode 2, just because it would build more hype up to Rick. This episode is better paced than the Rick episode 1. There is no pacing issues, because you have to do less with Michonne's character, unlike Rick, who's been gone for almost a decade. Michonne's been gone for a year, and we find out why she's been gone. We get the best characters in The Ones Who Live in this episode, like Nat. Absolutely amazing character. It's a shame they just kill him off at the end of this episode. I really enjoy Michonne's story and them adding this personal beef she has with the CRM. And this episode gives us Michonne's first introduction to the CRM, which I really enjoyed they didn't do with Rick. So we got it with Michonne, her going through the process of becoming a part of the CRM. Absolutely amazing. This episode, as I said, should have been episode 1, but I really, really enjoy it. And move on to number 2 is Daryl Dixon, The Book of Carol, Season 2, Episode 3. This is by far my favourite episode of Daryl Dixon Season 2. Every other episode in this season just doesn't compare to it. This episode has Carol on top form. We have her interact with Madame Genet. We get the origins of Madame Genet. I really enjoy that this is the first episode where Daryl's storyline gets going. And the stakes are so high in this episode for both Carol and Daryl, where Carol was having to be careful about Madame Genet and trying to use her, but Madame Genet is playing 4D chess and outsmarts her, and you get this epic finale where Carol's now put in a line to be shot and turned into a variant walker. And the Daryl storyline, Laurent is about to die, and you got Lusang being a full-on villain, and then you get my favourite scene in the entirety of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon so far, and that's the one shot of Daryl just murdering people and just going through this one-man army throughout all of the nest and eventually being captured and being overpowered by the villain. I really enjoyed because they didn't do that in Season 1. Daryl was this absolute unit. I really like how Season 2 broke Daryl down a little and let him lose fights. And just that whole scene where Daryl just kept just killing people in one shot. So well choreographed. This is by far the best looking, best paced, and best acted episode in Daryl Dixon Season 2. Every other issue that was in Daryl Dixon Season 2 just isn't in this episode. And it really does feel like Season 1 this episode does, with the Carol storyline perfectly added in. It's a shame the rest of the season could not replicate what this episode captured. And now number 1 is The Ones Who Live episode 4, and this is a 10 out of 10 just like number 2, number 3 and number 4, and especially number 2 and number 1, the Daryl Dixon season 2 episode 3 and The Ones Who Live episode 4, they're almost interchangeable. They are that good. These are all perfect episodes, but the reason why I'm putting this as my favourite episode is because of the performances of Andrew Lincoln and Denai Guanera. This episode has them giving it their entire all. The plot is simple. The story kind of stands still, and it is literally just Rick and Michonne locked in a room together, and it really focuses on their love. And when you see The Ones Who Live as the love story, not the CRM story, this is the peak of that story. The whole previous 3 episodes have been building to Rick and Michonne arguing, and this episode has their relationship breaking down and them repairing their relationship. And it's so annoying that Denai Guanera and Andrew Lincoln got nothing for their performances. They got no awards, no nominations or anything. It's really dumb because of how amazing the performances are. And this is Denai Guanera's first ever directing debut, and it's so well shot, so well done. This episode doesn't really have those big action set pieces. There is a collapsing building which seems to forget it's collapsing so the story can continue on with the dramatic and the romance, but it's so well done. There might be issues here and there, and some people might think this episode's overrated. You could have done some more CRM stuff so the final episode couldn't be rushed, but because if you look at this as a love story, we needed this episode, and this episode is just my favourite just because of how well performed it is. And maybe in a month or 2 time, I might flip and say Daryl Dixon Season 2 Episode 3 is my favourite because of that amazing one shot that we have, the big cinematography and stuff like that. But this is just my list and my thoughts and opinions. So please tell me down below, what do you think? What are your rankings of the Walking Dead episodes in 2024? What's your most favourite? What's your least? I'd like to know everything down in the comments. And this is it for me today. So thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you later.